Senator Pat Moynihan's observation that each is entitled to his own interpretations but not his own facts. Happens anyway, obviously. But what happens when those facts and those interpretations suddenly align? Our third story in the countdown, when a man who denied that waterboarding is torture suddenly changes his mind, does it change the debate? Rachel Maddow joins me in a moment. The man who had that genuine first-hand experience, WLS radio host Eric Mancow Muller. A refresher.
We're going to do it on 5, okay?
Okay.
1, 2, I lied. Ooh, water going.
All right, that's it. That's it. All right. Oh, God. Mancow is soaked. Would you consider that torture?
Look, all that's been done to this country, and I heard about water being dropped on someone's face, and I never considered torture. Even when I was laying there, I thought this is going to be no big deal. I go swimming. It's going to be like being in the tub. It is such an odd feeling to have water poured down your nose and your mouth with your head back. It was instantaneous. I thought I could hold out 30 seconds, 60 seconds. It was instantaneous, and I don't want to say this. I do not want to say this. Absolutely torture.
You do?
Absolutely. I mean, that's drowning.
But on this program last night, Mr. Mueller expanded on that, saying that the experience was far worse than drowning, quoting him, "Your brain is shut off." And later, "I would have said anything to make it stop." And he reiterated without equivocation the central point, that waterboarding is torture, that he was telling even those who did not wish to hear it.
First of all, Sean Hannity called me and said, it's still not torture. I said, Sean, he's a friend of mine. It is torture.
Let's turn now to a friend of mine, Rachel Maddow, the host of the Rachel Maddow Show. Good evening.
Hi, Keith. Nice to see you.
A simple admission, but a profound one from Mancow, given that the first-hand experience changed his mind. Does it change anything in the bigger picture?
I think it does change things to the extent that the debate is honest. And to the extent that the debate isn't honest, it won't have an effect on it. I mean, from the very beginning, this has been a debate that involved a lot of fake expertise. I mean, from the very beginning, going all the way back to the Pentagon and the Vice President's office deciding that they had a better idea about what they wanted to be international intelligence than what the intelligence community was telling them, with the CIA hiring contractors who had no interrogation expertise because they knew better than experienced professional interrogators like those at the FBI how to actually get information out of people, and then carrying on into the national debate about torture that started 5 years ago now, with all of these people involved in the debate having no first-hand experience, no professional experience, no direct experience of these things, but yet being willing to substitute their own judgment for those who would actually know the answers to these moral, important, world-changing questions. And now Mr. Mancow does have first-hand experience of this. That should factor into the debate. If the debate's honest, it will.
And maybe the best answer on this is the I don't know answer, because when I asked him if he thought now that he could trust an answer given by somebody who'd been waterboarded, he said, I don't know the answer to that. And obviously that's the point, but how do you get that point across to others who were or are where he was? I mean, you can't waterboard everybody who believes waterboarding isn't torture. It totally defeats the purpose of opposing waterboarding. And you can't waterboard even the opinion makers who reinforce that idea. The Associated Press just moved a story about this whole thing with Mancow and with me and what he did. Is that enough, or how does this thing get advanced to the point where people just question their own presumptions?
Well, on the issue of whether or not you can believe anything that anybody says under waterboarding, ultimately I think the debate will have fully matured when we stop debating that point altogether. I mean, what if you can get great answers out of people from waterboarding? What if you can get great answers out of people from dangling them out of helicopters over the open sea? What if you can get great answers out of people from raping them or killing their children in front of them? I mean, honestly, where do you stop? The point about torture is that it doesn't matter if it's effective. We don't do it. And the whole debate about effectiveness, I think, denies the idea that torture is beyond the pale. The reason that there are statutes against torture is not because people never thought it was effective before and were doing it otherwise. Everybody who's ever tortured did it because they thought it was effective, whether to discover whether or not somebody was a witch, or whether to discover the end of the plot on 24, or whether it was to discover whatever Dick Cheney wanted to discover in Guantanamo and Abu Ghraib. But the point of effectiveness ultimately will be left behind, I think, when the debate returns to its rational foundations.
Is that ever going to happen, though? Because first off, we have 2 or 3 generations raised on Rambo movies and torture scenarios, and Also, we have to, I think, acknowledge this. There's going to be a segment of every population in every country in the history of the world to this point, and presumably going forward, this will continue, at least in some measure, people who just don't really get the moral argument and think that as long as it isn't happening to them, it's okay. Isn't the most impactful argument being the one that this doesn't do anybody any good? It doesn't even achieve what your purpose is, even if you don't have any morals?
I don't think so.
No?
I think ultimately the United States ends up taking a role in moral leadership on this issue once again, and decides that the moral argument is the right argument, and decides that the reason there are statutes against torture, again, is not because of effectiveness, but because it's just plain wrong. I mean, there's a reason that politicians no longer get away with the assertion that something is legal because the president says it's legal. There's a reason that American politicians are laughed at, even by the general public, when they say that now. And that's because of the way that Watergate ended. Because of the fact that the only reason Richard Nixon was able to avoid impeachment is because he resigned, and the only reason he was able to avoid conviction is because he was pardoned. There needs to be accountability on this so that we do win the moral argument, and that's where it's settled. That's why accountability is so important on this issue.
Yeah, but you know that only happened because Woodward and Bernstein tortured all Deep Throat. You know that, right? Rachel Maddow, the host of the Rachel Maddow Show. And they say I never have anybody on the show who I disagree with. Rachel and I just disagreed on this central point about torture.
Ta-da!
Ta-da! All right, thanks, Rach.
Thanks, Keith.